This time on ChinnyVision, Tramiel's Revenge. Here we are in the ChinnyVision kitchen with my Atari 65XE. This has been the backbone of our Atari 8-bit coverage on the channel for quite a while. It's not very clean because it's been on the shelf, and it does get used. It gets used quite a lot along with its Atari Max My IDE 2 card, which is an essential purchase. I bought that years ago before I started doing the channel, I think, and I've never reviewed it. But if you want kind of instant access on your Atari 8-bit, certainly for an XL and XE, well, I don't think it works on the earlier ones. Yeah, you want one of these. It runs with the compact flash. It's very affordable. I think about 40 quid from America. Yeah, essential purchase. But we all know the Atari 8-bit. You say Atari 8-bit, you think of Attack of the Mutant Camels, Hover Bother, all those, Rescue on Fractalus, and all that stuff, Ball Blazer, and all those great games available for the system. Lots of colours, lots of sprites and scrolling and stuff. And my mate Chris had an 800 XL, which is the slightly better built and a better looking machine that costs more if you're wanting to buy it. And he had loads of great games for that. He didn't care much for it, actually, but even when he had an ST, I used to go around there and say, oh, could we get the XL out? And he'd go, oh, I don't want to play the old games. I want to play all the rubbish games I've got for my ST, like a game called Skidoo, which was absolutely rubbish, but did have samples on the title screen that he really liked, but it just sounded like noise. And I wanted to play all the great games he had in his XL. So I got one of these before I started the channel and bought this one on Amiibay. And it's had a new memory inside it because these are known for being particularly unreliable, these machines. There were quality control issues and quite a lot of people have had to replace the memory in their machine. So if you buy one, you open it up, then chances are you probably have got new RAM in there, or if it doesn't work, you probably have an issue with the RAM, which should be fairly easy to fix. Huge life of the Atari 8-bit machines. Of course, they came out in 1979 and discontinued in 1992. This is the second to last iteration of the Atari 8-bit system. Of course, there was the XE game system with that weird detachable keyboard that came out afterwards that was sold in catalogues for a long time. And that explains the 1992 date, because mums would buy this stuff very cheaply for their kids and give it to them for Christmas. Places like Argos, Littlewoods and so on. No serious gamer would be buying one of these in 1990, 1991, 92. But yeah, and I think they came with a light gun as well on a couple of games from memory, and those big colourful buttons. But yeah, bit dated by then. Also on the forums, and we'll come to this, there's known issues with the keyboards failing, the keyboard membranes failing. I say this is a 65XE. It's called 65 because it's one better than the 64, which would be, of course, a Commodore 64. You see, Jack Tramiel had come over from Commodore to Atari, and he called his computer the 65XE. But this isn't the machine we're going to look at today, for I have somewhere, and by the way, ChinnyVision calendars, by the time you see this, might still be available because they're going very fast when I'm recording this, but lots of great games covered in there, all real screenshots, real hardware screenshots. Power Drift there, Chubaruba, North and South there, as you can see. Let's try and get another one. Firelord there as well. $16.99 delivered in the UK or the EU. A little bit more if you're in the USA or Australia or further abroad, just because it cost me £3 more to post it to somewhere like America. Limited stocks, and we have ChinnyVision pens as well, which I don't have one here, but I'll probably get one out when I'm pointing at stuff inside. But anyway, I bought a 130XE because I couldn't play the new games available for the system. There are all these new games available for the Atari 8-bit, and they seem to be mainly 128K only. So I decided what I needed was a 128K machine. So we get this out of the way. So I went on eBay, and I've been looking for one of these for quite a while. And because ChinnyVision has funds, because we have very kindly Patreon supporters, and people buying the pens and the calendars and things, I decided to do a little experiment. It's something I wouldn't usually do. Rather than buy a machine as I usually would and just take a punt on it, I decided instead to go for a refurbished machine. I say again, refurbished, to see what you actually get, because I've always said when refurbished stuff is sold that quite often it's just someone wiping a cloth over a machine and saying, oh yes, we have refurbished it. Should I go refurbished, refurbished, refurbished? Refurbished should always be in didder. And so I decided to pay extra and get a refurbished machine to see what you actually got. So I got this, and the power supply isn't in the box at the moment because it's too heavy and I don't want to damage the machine. It's an Atari 130 XE, 128K of memory, or 131072 bytes of random access memory. And excuse the coffee, but I am, well, drinking coffee, which is now cold. I'll talk to you about the listing that I've got on my phone here. So I'll tell you about the listing. It's listed as, and I'll show you there. There you go. I can actually read that myself now. Atari 130 XE vintage computer in box with manual, refurbished, £130. £130. I would have paid 80 or 70 or something like that with a better box if I was just buying this in. But as I say, this was an experiment. Kindly thanking the people who support the channel for doing this. So £130, £15 shipping, 13 bits. Condition, seller refurbished, brand Atari vintage computer, blah, blah, blah. And what we have in the description is, this is an Atari 130 XE computer, including box, power supply, and manual. We've got a box, got a power supply over here, and a manual. The computer seems to be fully working. You've refurbished this. Seems refurbished. Okay, we'll go with this. It can run basic programs in the manual perfectly with a crisp picture and sound. Can't fully test the computer as I don't have any games, but using the built-in test program, it seems to be fully functional. Let's read that again. This is refurbished. Cannot fully test the computer. Cannot fully test the computer. The computer is refurbished, including case and keyboard widening to bring it back to a more original colour. Okay, so you've retrowrited it. Well done. Capacitor replacement. We'll see. This should increase the life and stability of the machine for future use. The box has some damage and maybe some marks of decolouring of the case, but generally it's a really good looking machine, would be perfect for a collector or hobbyist. The box and power supply seem to be original and they have the same job number as the computer, possibly from a previous repair. Okay, fair enough. It's an Atari, probably had RAM done at some time, they pretty much all have. At the end are a couple of pictures of other computers' colour beforehand and a comparator, blah, blah, blah. And I've set the reserve at £80. I won't go lower than this. I believe it's more than the fair price can be verified by my other listings. Okay. Got some nice pictures of the box, and what turned up seems to be correct. He's got pictures of it working there, certainly on the self-test. And the self-test should be enough. We've got some before and after pictures there as well. So before we start, I want to get this thing off the desk. So we have inside the box an Atari power supply, and obviously it weighs a ton. It's a transformer, weighs quite a bit. Got to be careful when sending these because this could easily cause damage to your micro if packed up with it. It is 5 volts, 7.5 VA. You can replace these things. This connector looks really complicated right here. That looks super duper complicated. Many pins, 2, 4, 6, 7 pins. But say 2 wires going into there. So is it splitting off the voltages to different pins? Or is it just a Atari trying to make the connector as difficult as possible so only they can sell the adapters? But you could just cut that and buy a PSU. I'm sure someone will actually sell those as well. But yeah, I'd replace that. Old vintage style plug on the end. Computer. Right, let's put that on the floor. Out of the way. We have the box over here. Right, this is the box. Picture of the Atari on front. 131072 bytes of random access memory. Compatible with all Atari peripherals and 65 XE and presumably 800 XL software. So it's just trying to reiterate that it's compatible with the other Atari machines. This box contains Atari 130 personal computer, owner's manual, TV switch box and video cable. I didn't get a TV switch box, and you shouldn't need that. I suppose you could switch between aerial and TV. Anyway, I didn't get that. AC power supply and warranty card, didn't get that. Apple in Sunnyvale, Atari in Sunnyvale, California. And there's not, I've got stuff on the back. I was going to say not much else on here, but I haven't seen the back. A maximum system for minimum cost. The 130XE is a centre of a powerful computing system. Whether you need a small business computer, a personal management centre, or simply a place for family to get together and have fun, the 130XE is everything you need and at a very affordable price. Remember, the ST came out at the same time as these two machines, the 65XE and 130XE. Build a complete computer system around your Atari by adding state-of-the-art and low-cost peripherals, blah, blah, blah. Printers. There is almost no limit to your system. Almost no limit. I'd say there's quite a few limits, but hey-ho. Add a modem, add a monitor, light pens, touch tables, joystick, keypads, game controllers, all just go and buy an ST. Cartridge slots, special expansions capability, software capability, full stroke keyboard. Yeah, I suppose kind of, yeah. Player missile graphics and hardware expandability. Got a serial number on the side. It is number 1007345. And let's get it out the box. Here we go. And we have a manual and a couple of polystyrene bits, but nothing else. That's completely true to what the listing said. Bring that over here and out the way, somewhere down there. So we've got our owner's manual. Oh, we've got a card from the people who sold it to me. I won't put the guy's details on there, but yeah, we'll put that out the way. And what I said, honking it up. It was Chinny Honk. Kind of standard manual for the time. Bit of basic programming. It's very similar to many Commodore 64 manuals and other things. The warranty card is in the back. You have to send it to America. Right. I assume they might have put a UK one in, but this is of course Atari, so you've got to send that international. Unless they put a UK one in the box as well. I got the pin ins and outs on the back. Oh, right. This is interesting for the power supply point of view. All those pins. Right, there's only 2 wires that go into this connector, and we've got 3 5-volt feeds going off to different points. Why not just split that once it's inside the machine rather than split it on the connector, thus making life for everyone much, much more difficult? Because it's just 5 volts and ground. And you've got 3 sets of 5 volts and 3 sets of grounds. And a shield pin. Which, I suppose, yeah, that's going to be the... But there's only 2 wires. Where's the shield coming from? Yeah, might suggest you just cut the wire at the transformer end and use that and not have to worry about soldering it. You've got the monitor jack there, which has luminance and chrominance. So that's basically S-video, but it's not a very compatible S-video for memory. It works, though. It works. And you've also got just normal composite on there as well. We have a quick look at the machine. Look at the machine itself. It looks very much like an ST because it was launched at the same time. Same buttons up there, same lights in the same place. It's a mini ST. This is what Atari wanted. Your joystick ports are on the side. On the back, you've got your peripheral interface. You've got a cartridge slot. You've got an expansion port there. Monitor that we've talked about. Television connector. Power on the side there with all those pins on it. A big chunky on-off switch. Didn't cut corners on that. You would have thought they would have saved a few quid by a few dollars by not including that, but they have. And so your cartridges go in there instead of slotting in the top as they do with the XL. Nothing on the other side. You can see a little bit of discolorization between the top and the side there. Keyboard is, well, yeah, I mean, it's not as bad as the Plus 4 keyboard, but It's a bit like typing on dead flesh. It's kind of... They vary, and we'll come to that, but it's not great. But as I say, it's not like the +4 where you have to hit it fairly hard to do stuff. And you've got these buttons up here, which are as terrible as they are on the ST. Now, we have to come to the issue. Now, I got this out of the box and started to use it, and I had a problem. I loaded up a game, I put my cartridge in, and I'm using the machine fine, and I loaded up Ball Blazer, as you would with Atari like this. Good game, you know it works, you've got an image you know works, that's a good way to test it. And I couldn't start the game. And I was not getting any response from the start or select buttons. And the help buttons worked, the options button worked, the reset button worked, but those two were dead. So I contacted the seller saying, "Hi, the XE is here but not getting any response from select or start keys. Reset an option to fine, being it trying to use the self-test menu or selecting games like Ball Blazer. Happy to take a look, but not until I've spoken to you." And that's my email there, done through eBay. I got a response, "Oh really? That's quite strange. The keyboard is made from a conductive ink printed on a plastic surface, so nothing mechanical switches should be at fault. Maybe check there's no dust under the keys. It might not be letting the key down enough. If that doesn't work, under the keyboard is a ribbon cable that connects to the motherboard. Perhaps in postage it may have been knocked out slightly. If you put it out completely and put it in again, this should resolve the problem. The main board should be..." and there it ends. Right, so rather than me go through the rest of the emails here, let's open this machine up. Because I've been in here before, because I've had to be in here before. But let's have a look and see what refurbished actually means. So this bit's been recorded later on because this all took so long to cut together and it was incredibly tedious even for this channel. So I'm going to condense down what happened. I opened up the Atari and I've had to blur out the company's logo who sold me the unit because they'd helpfully put it inside as well. They, like their stickers, they stuck one on the power supply, on the back of the unit, and on the heat shield inside the unit. The heat shields are a little bit of a pig to get off, especially if the little tags that hold them down have been twisted at some stage. And you can help that when you come to put them back in. But you get the heat shield off and you get underneath and you see what is quite a clean machine. We have a look round and evidently it has been recapped. Looks like Nippon Chemicon caps have been installed, good quality ones. The machine's clean, so that looks okay. A little bit of suspicion on the top of that keyboard connector where there's insulation tape. So we take the keyboard apart. This bit's fiddly because there's lots and lots of tiny little screws that are easily lost. We take it apart and, oh dear, it's quite evident what has gone on here. There's been, looks like 2 attempted sets of repairs with a carbon pen or carbon paint and a brush. It's not just like a few dabs here and there as you may do where you have a failing membrane and you just want to keep one key working for now because this stuff always rubs off. That's the thing. But it looks like fairly major repairs, and some of the stuff is actually sticky and coming off on my fingers, which is probably the second set of repairs. And where it's been daubed on like that, those keys that run along the top have just gone straight through the carbon paint with only a few uses, it seems. In short, this isn't what you'd call refurbished. So I got back to the seller. He admitted that, yes, he had been at it with carbon paint, and that really isn't what you call refurbished, because if you're taking that keyboard apart and you're setting this unit on, having seen that membrane and daubing paint over it, did you really think it was going to last? And what's the point of doing that and all that time and effort of getting it open in the first place when an extra £20 will buy you a membrane? So I negotiated with him. He said I could send it back, and I didn't really want to send it back. So in the end, he agreed to pay me £20. In fact, the membrane replacement cost me £23, and of course all this time to open the unit up and replace it, because it's not a quick job, even if you've done these before, because you've got to be very precise when you get it all together. You slot the new membrane in. I ordered this membrane from, I think it's Poland, and they sent me some lovely sweets as well, lovely fudge, which is a good way to get me to say nice things about you. Put some fudge in with your product, but the unit looked good. There was a small fold on one corner of the membrane. It doesn't appear to have impacted the performance. Put it all in, and that old membrane is good for nothing but throwing away. Very carefully line up those screws, because what you don't want to do is when you put the screws back into the keyboard, you don't want to be punching holes through your new membrane. So you've got to get it very precisely lined up. And one thing I did also notice when I was putting the screws back in was some of them wouldn't fully tighten up, which means these screws have probably been over-tightened at some stage. And that's always the thing. Always finger tightness on these micros, especially because they're old plastic now. You don't go tight. They would have held that back in the day possibly, but not now. Not with Atari quality plastics. Just finger tightness will do it. All back together. Now to get the RF shielding back on. These machines have RF shielding because, of course, they're American. FCC regulations required these machines to have them. Didn't require that in the UK. That's why your Spectrum kicks out so much RF. If you tune to a sweet spot just below Radio 1, the FM dial, you can actually pick up the Spectrum's signal. And if you know the Amstrad CPC, of course, if you've got a German one where they did have RF regulations, you'll know your German CPC weighs far more and has proper shielding in it compared to the units sold everywhere else. And that's also why they don't have the edge connectors on the back, because again, those spew out RF. So we're going to get this RF shield back on, get some thick nose pliers and very carefully prise all those little flaps back so they are exactly straight. It's a job that takes a little bit of time, because you've got to be careful not to hit components on the board. Just get a big chunky old pair of pliers and clip all those clips back together. You may need a little screwdriver just to prise them initially away from the board, but be very, very careful. If you get this right, and it took me 2 attempts, your RF shield to slot back on, and then using the thick end of the pliers of the nose, just gently push down just as far as it needs to be to secure it so it doesn't rattle. You don't need to be tight down on the board. Don't twist them. Don't do anything like that, because if you go in here again, you're going to go through all this mess. And these little tags will only stand so much bending. So you just want them to gently bend into position so they just do the job. Don't go silly. Just tread lightly, okay? You'll thank me for it. When you plug the membrane back into the main board unit, do it very carefully. Sometimes on Spectrums, for example, you get a little bit of cardboard on some membranes to help you insert it in. But this doesn't have it, so you've got to very carefully put it back in. In fact, I couldn't even do that on camera because I had to line it up precisely with my head right down next to it. So very gently, just gently ease it in with your fingers and thumbs either side. Also, while we're inside, let's have a look around and see what treasures lie within. Now, I'm not an Atari expert, so big thanks to Steve Green, who has, I sent him some pictures from inside the machine, and he's talked me through what each of those chips are. So, on the top left there, we've got the Sally chip, which is a 6502 CPU with a halt input for stopping the processor. The famous Antic chip is the next one down. That generates all the playfield graphics and passes them on to the GTIA, which is beneath that, the third one down there, and that generates sprites, and which Atari always calls player and missile, and also adds colours to the playfield graphics. Moving down, we've got the operating system ROM, and then the basic ROM. On the right hand side, that big chip there is the peripheral interface adapter, which is based on a 6520. And then the other one is another famous chip from these machines. If you had Ball Blazer on a 7800, you've got one of these inside your cartridge. It's the Pokey sound chip, which gives you 4 channels of audio. And of course, it also does, just like the AY and the CPC, other tasks, so it measures potentiometers and keyboard switches as well. So basically, in effect, I guess it's the keyboard controller. Down beneath the memory on the left-hand side, we've got the Freddy chip, which is a RAM multiplexer unit with the EMMU, which allows the CPU and Antic to access memory independently of each other. And of course, that is next to the RAM chips. Now, there's two banks of 64K of RAM there. So if you've got a 64XE, you'll have one of those banks unpopulated. I believe there's some kind of switching system, so it detects if it's 128K as well. Now, thing about these machines is that, as well as keyboard failures they're known for RAM failures. My 65XE was sold to me by somebody on eBay, and in fact he'd replaced a number of RAM chips. And looking in here, we can see we've got two different brands of RAM chips. It's usually the Micron ones that fail, apparently, and also some of those RAM chips are socketed, which is interesting. So I'm guessing as well, perhaps they are the ones that have been replaced. Whoever put the replacements in has put in sockets for ease of replacements in the future. Also, I guess, it's a slight extra component cost, but if when you reassemble this machine after you've been repairing it and a RAM chip has failed, you can just whip it straight out and put another one in, thus saving you time for the expense of just a few more pence for an extra component. This is, of course, a cost-down design. I fully expect an 800XL has far more inside it. Got various banks of resistors in there that you'd expect, and there's about 9-10 capacitors in the machine as well, all of which have been replaced. They look like they've been replaced with Nikon Chemicon caps, which, if Dave Jones is to be believed, are some of the best ones you can buy. So in that terms of restoration, they've done quite a good job. Pull the machine back together and bingo, yep, tested it on the self-test and in basic. It all works fine, which is a relief whenever you put a new membrane in. Sometimes you might find one key may not work too well. There's something with my Amiga 600 where I think it's one of the shift keys doesn't work quite as well as it should, but I really don't want to take it all apart again. It's good enough. There's something slightly wrong there somewhere with the carbon contact on the key or something, but it's good enough. Now, the Atari, in terms of UK 8-bit computers, is an also ran, which will upset many Atari owners, but it's true. You went into a shop in the mid-80s, late 80s, and you wouldn't be falling over Atari titles. My mates who had an 800XL used to have to go to a special shop in Aldershot. They were pretty much the only people who sold games. The newsagent would have a few Mastertronic Atari games on the shelf, but not much. Machines tended to be sold well by Silica. They used to sell a lot of them. Specialist independent dealers, and of course the catalogues, which Atari seemed to enjoy selling into. And the XE game system was sold right away through until 1992 in places like Argos and Littlewoods. It's a very competent gaming system. So many famous games you can mention, and we'll do a full feature on Atari games in a future video, but the big games, Ball Blazer, Rescue on Fractalus, all the Lucasfilm games, all the Jeff Minter games as well, Attack of the Mutant Camels, Hover Bobble, which we've both covered, and there's also lots of lovely oddball games as well that you don't always get on the other platforms. In the UK, there is a certain amount of shovelware, pretty much like the MSX suffered from, where coders were given a weekend to port a game. For example, the terrible conversion of Feud, which makes the C64 version look like a masterpiece. Yes, they took the Bug 64 version and ported it really badly to the Atari 8-bits. No idea why they did that. The Atari websites have really good lists of games, and there's also an active homebrew scene releasing new games, which is one of the reasons I've wanted 128K. But it's a great system and a very enjoyable one to play on. Just don't always expect the big 8-bit games to be ported particularly well, where the Atari XLs is with its own titles that have been coded properly, especially the American titles. Basically, apply what you know about the MSX and Japanese titles to the Atari 8-bit and American titles. They're always going to be better. So I'm sticking on the studio setup now because it's just easier to sum all this up. The Atari 8-bit is a fantastic system. We will do a full roundup of games another time because this video's gone on for quite long enough. But what started out as a review of the Atari 130 XE has turned into a bit of a warning about refurbished systems. It's buyer beware. You've got to be very confident, I think, in the people who are doing the refurbishment as to what work has been done. Certainly with these machines, keyboard membranes are a big problem. Amiga 600s and Amstrad CPC 664s also suffer from this, and I don't need to tell you about Spectrum 48K and 48K Pluses. For me, it's been an interesting exercise. It kind of proves what I thought all along about some of these eBay sellers who stick stuff on as refurbished. With regards to the 130 XE as a system, you have to ask yourself if you need those 128K games. If you also want to play original games from the 80s, there's very, very few exclusive 128K titles for the machines. Save your money and go for 65 XE. If, like me, you want to play the new homebrew games that use 128K of RAM, then a 130 XE is an essential purchase. Although if you want a looker and the cool value, then the 800 XL is the Atari 8-bit machine that is the one to have. That's if you can afford one.